Hello, this is Simon Brew. I'm the editor of Film Stories magazine, and a very warm welcome to a very special episode of the Film Stories podcast.
Come with me.
And I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
And movies that had stories.
That the story just sucks them in.
This is just the beginning.
Stories. We would be honored if you would join us.
Hello, and a very warm welcome to Film Stories with Simon Brew. I am Simon Brew, as always. That's absolutely everything you need to know about me. The aim of the podcast, though, well, the title gives it away. I'm here to talk of the stories of films, and I tend to talk about development stories, production stories, marketing stories, release stories, all those ingredients really that go towards making the films that we know and sometimes love. Just that, the films that we know and sometimes love. However, what you've landed upon here is one of my occasional special episodes of the podcast where I bring in a filmmaker, or in this case filmmakers, to talk about their work and to talk about their own film stories. And I'm really delighted this episode to be joined by Densham and John Watson. Now, Densham and Watson wear many hats, but primarily for the purposes of this, they are screenwriters and producers. And so we came together first and foremost to talk about the film Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, dating back to 1991, that they wrote and co-produced. But also, what became clear when researching them is, which I sort of knew a bit of this beforehand, was just how deep a backstory that they've got. Because even before they came to Robin Hood, they'd made dozens of short films together. And so you're going to hear flavours of that really throughout the conversation. So a couple of notes just ahead of this that are worth knowing. I reference at one point Francis Ford Coppola's American Zoetrope. And this was his organisation that brought together filmmakers with a very indie spirit. So I just name check that really at one point. We also get in, and perhaps surprisingly, into Rocky II, directed by Sylvester Stallone. We also talk about the film Escape to Victory in the US as well. Then we touch on competing Robin Hood projects when the Robin Hood Prince of Thieves script was coming together. That Marshall Herkovich was doing one, a Robin Hood for TriStar, that Die Hard director John McTiernan was working on a Robin Hood for Fox as well. And then there was a further Robin Hood completed with Patrick Bergin that was made for Fox as well, all on top of Robin Hood Prince of Thieves that Densham and Watson were putting together themselves. I briefly mentioned too a man called Joe Roth, who was studio head at 20th Century Fox at the time of the competing Robin Hoods. And then I name check a film that I really like, an indie film that's quite hard to track down, Dangerous Lives of the Altar Boys, starring Emile Hirsch and Jodie Foster. And much of the conversation there just speaks for itself, but those I think are the things it's worth knowing before we get going. Without further ado then, I'm going to set up the conversation with a clip from 1991's Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves. It's out now in a deluxe set from Arrow, who've released it on the 4K Ultra HD Blu-ray format as well, with both cuts of the film included. I'll just get that plug in quickly there. Here's a clip. You'll come to hear my conversation with Densham and John Watson, the other side of this.
Loxley.
So that was a clip from Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, and I'm delighted to be joined by its co-writers and co-producers, John Watson and Densham. So first of all, have I pronounced your names correctly? And secondly, are you both okay?
Yeah, we're doing great. I don't think you can mispronounce Watson there very well, but you tried.
I'll give it a go. I'll give it a go.
It's the old story. I don't care how you pronounce my name as long as I get on the billing.
Okay, fair enough. So that was John speaking first, Penn speaking second, just for those listening. Your story, I wanted to talk to you for a really long time because what I love about your story, and I discovered this about a year or two ago, is by the time you got to 1991 and Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, which I'll come to shortly, you'd done something like 100 odd films together. Is that right? That your working
Yes.
partnership had been, because I read about people with overnight successes, and yet you seem to have an overnight success after 2 Oscar nominations and 100 odd films together. So can you tell me how you two came together, please?
Well, we met in Toronto, Canada. We were both working for other film companies, and Penn was a cameraman and I was an editor, and we realized that if we combined forces, we could actually...
Oh, John, you came to live in our closet. You've forgotten that part.
Yeah. Initially, when Penn and I first met, I was pretty impoverished, and I was begging for a place to stay. I'd just flown up from Chicago, and he said, well, you can sleep in the closet. So that's where I spent the first month of our friendship, was sleeping in the closet and shooting movies.
I had started a film commune with a bunch of people from the film industry, all sharing the same house and all cooking together. John is a Greek classic scholar with an MA from Cambridge, and I quit school at 15 in England, tried to start my own businesses there, became a discotheque disc jockey at 19, fled the country at 19 thinking I was a washed up failure, and went to Canada and found a culture where didn't matter what your accent was, didn't matter what your school was. If you had ideas and you could connect with other filmmakers, you could have a life. And I got a job in a film lab and watched all the movies that were going out to all the different companies, went and joined one of those and ended up thinking, hey, I can do this stuff. And then John we all lived together. And John edited the first serious movie I made, which was a 10-minute documentary on kids playing on the streets in what was called Cabbage Town, which was an impoverished area. And that's how we started our relationship.
Well, I'm a son of a Somerset farmer. My whole family are farmers. My grandfather, my brother's a dairy farmer, my cousin's a sheep farmer. And so I should be out milking cows instead of making movies. But, well, as soon as I got my hands on a piece of film, I was hooked. That was it. That's what I wanted. I knew that's what I was meant to be in my life.
So if I've got it right, wasn't 1991 the year of City Slickers as well, John? So when you saw that film and like the cow milking and stuff, did you think that was the film you should have done in 91?
Well, City Slickers came out exactly the same
time. That's right. Yeah, I remember that.
We had a joint press conference down in New Orleans with Slickers team and us, and it was we were going out into the world together. Sorry, I've got to ask about. Go on.
One other thing that is strange and weird. My folks made short films when I was a little kid that went into the movie theaters. I was 4 years old and rode an alligator.
I heard this.
A professor in England found this movie and asked me if I wanted it. So last year, he sent me a 16mm version of this film, which I had dubbed to video, and I watched myself in this little film that my folks had made. And my mother died when I was 8, and there was actually a few seconds of her with me that day that I was riding this 8-foot alligator in this woman's home in Chertsey. And it was really stunning to see this thing after all these years.
There aren't that many alligators in Chertsey, to my knowledge.
No, there was a couple of alligators, and she also had crocodiles. And being 4 years old, I remember her being very, very, stay away from that tank, because whatever was in that tank would eat me. So, but that gave me a lifelong, being around my father and watching them making movies, lifelong desire to cast spells with a camera. And John and I, when we started working together making short films, that was our goal. We wanted to be magicians with a camera. We wanted, people to fall into a trance when they watch one of our movies.
And so was it kind of a mini zoetrope almost environment? Because Coppola was doing a similar thing, wasn't he? That filmmakers living.
We were doing short documentaries and small TV specials and things. He was doing dramas. And it took several years, but we learned that if you didn't enter into awards and didn't win awards, then people didn't know how to value your movies. But as soon as you were an award-winning filmmaker, there was a good chance you could get more money to go make the movies. And we wouldn't have to go work with those other people who we didn't respect all that much. So, so 10 years of making short films, 1-hour documentaries, sports films. And then I wrote and directed a drama, which John edited and produced. And that was sufficiently strong enough that it was reviewed by TV Guide as the best film of any length ever shown in Canada on TV. And you're going, no, I'm not that good. And I was invited by Norman Jewison to come to Hollywood.
And there's a name.
And then John joined me there. And then we started to realize that we actually knew more than most of the people in Hollywood from having made all these films and distributed our films. And we were brought in by Stallone, who was working with Jewison, and we were asked to fix Victory, fix Paradise Alley, we were film doctors. They were paying us
I'm glad you brought
$10,000 a week.
I'm glad you brought those up.
Movies.
Because that's you preempted my next question there. Although I want to come back to that joint press conference because that sounds fascinating. I've been reading into Trilogy Entertainment, the company that you put together with Richard Lewis, and you've got this list of films that no one from the outside looking in, with all due respect, would guess you've been attached to if they'd just come to you through your writing work. And I saw Escape. I have to call it Escape to Victory. That's what it's called in the UK, obviously. But I see Escape to Victory in there. I see Paradise Alley, and I see Rocky 2 as well. Can you talk about? You've just mentioned Stallone asked you in. There's a sentence with a backstory for a start. But what was your role on those films? You talked about you were fixing films because you knew how to. But how were you fixing them? What were you fixing?
When Stallone, I met Stallone when he was working on Fist with Norman Jewison.
Right.
And he was just going through that period when he was becoming a major star through Rocky, but people were taking punches at him in the lobby because they thought that would be cool. And I started showing him some of the movies that we'd made. And we were non-Hollywood. We weren't that world. And so he saw what we were doing with film, which we were very, John won more awards for his editing than any other editor in Canada. Yeah. And so when Stallone was starting to do his own movies, directing, he asked us to consult on those movies for him. And we were literally paid $10,000 a week to work on his films. And we were solving problems because we could look at the entire structure from how do you sell it to how do you edit it. Yeah. And John and I, and John very much, taking a lead, we would have 4 or 5 editors working for us on Rocky 2.
Yeah.
So that we could help make the film more emotional, more vibrant. And we helped Stallone by showing him how the ending of the film could be more cathartic by manipulating the footage he had into a much more successful emotional tour de force.
If you look at that 10-second count at the end of Rocky 2, it's completely fabricated in the editing room. The 10 seconds becomes like 5 minutes of the slow motion count cutting to all the corners. That was not intended. That was not written that way or shot that way. It was all put together after the event. We tend to think of ourselves as filmmakers, and Hollywood is more inclined to pigeonhole somebody as a director or editor or cinematographer. Because of all those movies we made together in Canada, we could write, direct, produce, do sound, do editing, you name it, design. We did it all. And so when we came out to Hollywood, we realized that we actually had a lot of skills that could be very helpful in helping other people complete their films.
And we also hired writers because we thought they were hallowed Hollywood writers, and then read the material that they were producing. And we said, shit, we could do better than that. Yeah. Because we were watching them get paid $100,000 while we were waiting for our opportunity to get to produce them. And we realized that that if you were passionate, you were disciplined, and you really brought everything you could, that you were capable as anybody else. And what John and I also do is we try and get back. John teaches at USC. He's a very, very valued and treasured encourager of young students. Yeah. And I try and give back as well, because we want people that look at us and say, hey, we were just kids and we had this house where we all hung out. We ended up in Hollywood. It's possible. If I could leave school at 15 and end up not not shaking hands at some Woolworths or something as you come in the door.
Long gone Woolworths, yeah. But okay.
Yeah, right.
I wonder if you could tell me then, because you said then you decided to write your own project, and you've told the story of the genesis of the Prince of Thieves story quite a few times. But I went and bought the book. That came out around the same time. So this is the official movie book. And you've written a few things in there, and I want to put one date to you, which is February the 14th, 1990. And that's
talk about that.
And so that's I don't know film books getting this specific about things. And so you talk about there, we were under immense pressure to make a decision very quickly. It required a cool head. And you talked about a negotiating marathon on that day to see who you would sell your Robin Hood Prince of Thieves script to. I just wonder, what memories do you have of February the 14th, 1990? Is that something that sticks in your head?
I remember it vividly. I mean, we went from being a script that Penn an idea that Penn came up with that no one wanted to buy, to deciding that we believed in it so much we would write it ourselves on spec, to suddenly in February, as it was coming out of the Writers Guild strike, realizing that we had a property that actually might be suddenly very popular, from no one being interested in Robin Hood, there were 3 Robin Hoods in contention.
Yes, well, I'm coming to that as well, yeah.
So and that was the day when our agent sent the script out to all around town, and the responses started coming in. You know, this head of this studio, who was halfway through it and liking it, the head of this studio thought it was terrific, but didn't think there was a market for it, etc., etc. And so in the evening of February 14th, we were confronted with this final fact that there were 2 potential buyers, and we had to pick between the 2.
One of those was Morgan Creek, presumably, and the other...
The other was Warner Brothers. And what we discovered through the grapevine was that they were going to take the script from us and give it to Joel Silver and kick us off it. And they were offering double what Morgan Creek was offering. And there was also, we were being offered by Fox, who had a Robin Hood with John McTiernan, the director.
That's right, yeah.
Die Hard attached, was also trying to buy it. And we thought they were going to kill it so they could make theirs. And so the only one we could go to and still be attached to, from our perspective, which was the decision that was going down on that day, was Morgan Creek, if we could trust that they weren't buying it secretly for Fox.
So, but was it conditional that you were being bought in not just as writers, but as producers as well?
Absolutely. Yes. We saw ourselves as producers that wrote a script, not the other way around.
And so
we saw this as our future. We saw this as that we could make this movie and produce this movie, that it would open the doors for us to make other movies, as opposed to just being the writers. So it was absolutely crucial to us that we stay involved.
And can I just get the chronology? Because it was your summer 1991, because Backdraft, of course, you developed for a long time as well. So where interweaved with all of this was Backdraft? I'm just trying to work out the diagram in my head.
Well, yeah, Backdraft had been in development for about 5 years. We started it with Dina De Laurentiis' company,
right? Okay.
And then it turned around and was picked up by Ron Howard, who wanted it to be his next movie, but we went through a series of rewrites that were taking it nowhere. So in the same year, 1990, that probably around the same date, we scrambled at the last minute over a weekend. We completely revamped the script, sort of cutting and pasting all the best elements together, and managed to turn Ron around from being willing to drop out of the movie to suddenly confirming that it was his next film. So it actually was shooting in Chicago during the same time that we were filming Robin Hood in England.
And so going to Robin Hood, I'm reading a Los Angeles Times article from 1990 that talks about the competitive nature of the 3 Robin Hoods, the 3 Robin Hood pictures at the time. And you're quoted as saying you wouldn't have been surprised if you bumped into TriStar in the woods.
We did run into TriStar in the woods in the new forest.
So this was for the McTiernan. Hang on, there was a Marshall Herkovich one as well. That was the TriStar one.
It was TriStar one, yeah. So
you did that actually happened. You bumped into the competing projects.
Well, we were there on the same day, although we didn't actually meet. We were like location scout was busy steering us away from where they were so that we wouldn't run into each other. But yeah, it was in the New Forest.
So in pre-internet times as well, because the Hollywood trades were very well informed of the angle of everybody's script. And like in the modern day, the script would leak online and the gossip would go all over. But it seemed like the full story was out there in 1990 of the approach of all three of these films. How involved were you in that? Was there a little bit of having to fight off the other projects, or was that other people playing games?
We were very much in a race. Yeah, we were very conscious of the fact that if we didn't move quickly, we would be beaten out by one of the other productions. And Kevin Costner expressed interest in publicly to all three productions.
Yes, I remember that. Yeah,
it was no secret that he wanted to be Robin Hood. That was he viewed that as his next project. So,
and we were hearing that he's being taken to Fox and being shown movie posters, which they contrived with him on the head of some other guy wearing the Robin Hood costume and trying to convince him to be in theirs. But we had a little inside baseball. We had an alliance with an agent called J.J. Harris, who was also representing Kevin. But Kevin actually left William Morris where she was and went to CAA, and she gave him our script anyway.
Right.
And she is the reason that movie got made, because he read that, and it was in his mind a far better characterization for him, and that's how we ended up attracting him to the material.
Yeah, we knew that he liked our script more than the other two, but they had a director with McTiernan on one of them, and they had more potentially bit higher profile companies behind them than Morgan Creek. But we also knew that he and Kevin Reynolds were very good friends. So we were constantly tracking Kevin Reynolds, who liked our screenplay, but he thought he had a go movie at Universal.
Yes.
And it wasn't until that movie fell apart that we were able to connect the two Kevins and make it happen.
So I spoke to Kevin Reynolds about this extensively, and the timelines again just absolutely boggle my mind of how fast you had to go to hit a September 1990 start date. But the story I've got as well is the two of you were on set doing some of the key personnel hires even before Kevin Reynolds came on board. He was on it that late. Can you take us into that bit of it a little bit?
Yeah, well, we knew we were in a race, and we not just against the other Robin Hoods, but against the weather, against leaves on the trees in England. That we had to be filming at the latest. I think the original start date was July, and then it slipped to August, and finally it was in September. So we couldn't just sit around. We had to believe it was going to happen. So I went over to England and I met with production designers and cinematographers and went location scouting all over the country and met with line producers. And so I had all those people ready for Kevin to meet as soon as he came on board. And he fortunately liked most of the people I'd found and most of the locations I'd found. And we were able to gear up incredibly quickly. That wouldn't have been possible if we hadn't jumped the gun on production. And credit to Morgan Creek for allowing us, encouraging us to do it, being willing to spend their money in prep, which totally paid off.
I think I can say this because I've had the conversation with Kevin Reynolds, but Kevin Reynolds he's a man of forceful mind. I think he's not without views of his own, and you've got that. I think I can say that, and you've got that contracted period of time where a new director comes on who's got a writing background as well to his work as well, of course. And I'm just wondering what impact the director has on your script at that point when you've got barely weeks to just get these things up and running, and how, was part of you being in as producers being able to protect it?
Well, there was a frustrating period of time when Kevin Reynolds had tons and tons of ideas that didn't necessarily mold with ours. And then Kevin Costner came in and he had ideas of his own. So Penn had to come over to England and was busy working away with all three versions of the screenplay while we were shooting. We were like building a bridge ahead of us as we were crossing it. And it was sort of all hands on deck situation. But at the end of the day, we made a movie that, that combined all of those sensibilities.
I love the film, so there's no slight on this whatsoever. I'm just curious, Penn, what does your Wednesday look like or something on the set of that when you're battling all these various forces and you're the one who's got to get it onto a piece of paper?
Well, there's certain times when you look at something and say, shit, why does he want that? And then you have to figure out, how do I get that feeling? Because he's, there's a note and you're trying to go, okay, I've got to keep my director so that the things that are impassioning him are working. So I have to try and refocus. Why is he saying that? Not do what he says. And so I kept doing changes that I felt made the films coherent and also got the emotion that he was looking for. And the script got better because of that process. And instead of getting angry about, and because I knew Kevin Reynolds as a friend and a fellow director before we did this movie. And so I just kept working. I had an assistant working with me to help bounce ideas backwards and forwards while John was off, as I say, up to his ass in mud and arrows. And I also had to then run over to work with Costner, and because he had his own things that he needed as an artist. And one of the tricks about film is making your actors so comfortable they can be vulnerable on screen. And so part of my goal was to be his ally and, in a way, a mentor. And I came up with a line for when he was talking to the woodsman trying to recruit them, and I said, capture, don't lecture. And that helped him immensely, because he suddenly saw what he was doing was humanistic. And so in both cases, trying to hold all these elements together, it was, in a way, it was fun. In a way, it was scary, because the film meant so much to John and I. And the film had a purpose for me, which was I wanted to make a film that was holistically valuable, a film where killing people was not celebrated like in the Schwarzenegger and Stallone movies like Commando, where human beings were just cannon fodder. But I wanted to make a film where dying for someone else's future was seen as dignity, and risking your life so that your peasants' children could have a future. So I was making that movie because I'd had the experience of having a child with my wife. The birth scene in Robin Hood is a metaphor for my son's cesarean operation, which was an emergency and terrifying, which I was in the room for. And those things were, and putting an Arab who was not a terrorist and not evil, but a man of great dignity and science, together with Robin, so that two religions could be illustrated collaborating with each other instead of killing each other. Those were the metaphors inside the adventure. And both John and I grew up loving Robin Hood as a story, as a folk legend. And it was, I was given the privilege, and also John and I were given the privilege afterwards. Kevin left the movie as soon as he finished his cut.
Yeah.
And we went back in and blended the material as we had done on other movies, into the flow of story and the tightness. We don't believe in dead time. We don't believe in letting an audience wake up. We don't believe in letting an audience misunderstand something, because then they get lost in a movie. And we had the test results. And so we were given with another wonderful guy called Stuart Baird control of the film. And we honed it back into the best version of all of the great ideas that we could come up with, but kept its family values and adventure as its primary reason to exist.
I don't know if you, as the producers of the film, were aware of this. I don't know whether I should be the one to tell you this, but were you aware that some of your crew were moonlighting on the other Robin Hood film that was shooting at the same time as well? The Patrick Bergin headlined one. We found this out.
I had no idea, and I don't even know how it was possible, since we were shooting 6 days a week.
We found out. We tracked down the story of the other one. Apparently, they went to the other one at weekends, but they came back to yours because the money was better and the food was better as well, which I thought was lovely.
We were shooting on weekends too, so good for them if they had the energy.
Absolutely.
I was working 22, 23-hour days. So there was no moonlighting for me. So
you weren't on the other one nicking their food. I can put that internet rumor to rest. So So, which I mean, we've got two cuts of this film now, and we're talking about just as Arrow has put out a beautiful set that's got both cuts of it. Do you have a favoured one then? If you were heavily involved in
Well,
fashioning
one
the
was an
theatrical one?
extension of the
Of
other.
course, but one I think
and-
is very known to be Kevin Reynolds' preferred. For instance, the longer one.
No.
That's what he sort of told me.
All the
Okay,
Kevin's. Well, I mean, I'm glad he loves it because there were elements of the story that were added, but
okay.
there was no real re-edit. All it was just the reveal that the witch was actually the
Absolutely.
mother, and a couple of other sheriff scenes that were added. But the script is the actual cut is the same. There's just additions.
Okay. So do you have
I
okay, I'll rephrase.
Stand by both versions, to be honest with you, Simon. I mean, the longer version is, in my opinion, too long for theatrical release. My pet peeve is that most movies are too long. So we wanted to keep it within a certain length, and we wanted to emphasize Robin Hood's personal story. That was our primary focus. So the additional material that's in the extended version, which is great fun, is the movie works without it, right? I mean, that's obviously the key. When in doubt, cut it out is one of my mantras. Will you notice if it's gone? And in a lot of those cases, we figured that the movie was flowing well without it. So, I mean, it's fabulous material, and it was put on us. Morgan Creek came to us and said, "We're going to put out an extended version. What do you want to add?" And those were the things that we elected to add. And
And there's something lovely and piquant about finding out that the crazy sheriff is actually the son of the witch. So it sort of made a wonderful elliptical sense to it.
I'm delighted that Kevin likes it.
But one thing I just missed about when the film was coming together was you two ended up on the front page of Variety when a rival studio head was talking about what he implied were the tactics involved in one Robin Hood script selling over the other. And I think this reflected badly on Joe Roth, who was heading at Fox at the time, and I think the pushback was against him at that time. But I just wonder, what was it like being in that glare, really? Because I can't imagine that's the most pleasurable place to be, and how fair you felt what Joe Roth was saying was.
Well, Joe Roth had no idea how our script came about. We were a spec script that we didn't even know that they were working on a Robin Hood. So to accuse us of something of whatever was going on back then was and we became great friends with Joe Roth, by the way. John worked with him on a couple of projects. So it's like I think Joe may have been actually covering his ass because he had been saying they was going to get this movie made, and he made the other Robin Hood version as a way of trying to justify having spent all that money, and then gave it out as a TV movie over here. But we were used to that. It's the film business is like playing a sport you love, and unfortunately, it's American football. You have to get hit. It's how the game gets played, and so you don't come into this not having the passion and the joy of making films without realizing there's always going to be critics. There's always going to be downers. There's always going to be people competing with you. And some films you love will get out and never get to see an audience, and other ones will succeed that look far worse than yours, and you didn't get yours made. And, it's like that's the game. So we didn't take.
We never worried about the politics. I don't think we ever worried about the politics of the film business. We just keep our head down and make movies and believe in what we believe in and push for them. I don't even remember the article you're talking about.
I just found it before, but I don't want to pull my phone out and just read it in front of me.
It's like, I mean, Robin Hood had a lot of very bad reviews, and I don't remember them either. But what I remember is the fact that people loved the film, and the audiences kept streaming in, and it's still showing 31 years later. So that's what's important. What people write in any given article on any given day.
Well, I mean, 31 years is extraordinary as well for it to still be savoured in the way that it originally was. And I'm just curious, coming out the other side of it, because you're that rarity, and I appreciate you were producers on it as well, of the writers who were with it. Right, it's so rare. I see a film story where the writers were the first in and the last out. But that seems to be the case here from what you were saying on it. And I just wonder, at the point that it is spiked and it was hitting big, what that moment was like. And I know it's like a very obvious question, but it's just the human side of it, because you've gone through these 20 years and making 100 films together, and then here was this massive success.
Ben, you got to go soon, so I'll let you answer.
Yeah, I think the disbelief was that, one doesn't expect to go out and have massive success. And also, I think there's got to be shared, that massive success isn't John or me. It's we're part of the things that we're able to bring together. So, Reynolds deserves some of that credit, but more than anybody that deserves that credit is Costner, who, he's in front of the camera. I say I'm a coward. I send my scripts out to audition. I don't stand in front of the camera. Where, his performance and what he brought to that movie, as John says, he's a star.
Yeah.
And the movie succeeded because of him. And when he was making Dances with Wolves, there was a snide thing going around the business calling it Kevin's Gate.
I remember that.
So he was going to lose $10 million, and they all thought that was funny. And then look at the answer. So what it comes back to is you own yourself in this business. You do what you believe you can do. We made that film from passion, not because we were trying to make money. We took far less money for the script because we wanted to control the movie, because we had a dream that we wanted to put on a screen. And the final result, with all the contributions of everybody involved, is something that's still alive. And I find that's humbling. And I'm very touched that people still want to see it.
John, how did the success feel to you? And then can you tell me about that press conference where, for some reason, you were put together with City Slickers? That's not left my head at all. That just seems insane to me.
Yeah, I don't know. The studios are trying to save money, I guess. So by having a combined press conference, I don't know. It never quite stops, right? There's never a moment in time where you go, oh, okay, done. We've made 2 hugely successful movies. Let's now relax. You're on a constant roller coaster, right? It keeps on going. It keeps on going. Keeps on going. So. It was like, what are we going to do next? Now we've got to live up to the success. Now we've got to be as good as we were before. And I don't know. The creative process keeps going and keeps energizing you. And
it's sort of the reason I asked the question, really, because human beings aren't very good at stopping and saying, "Crikey, that was rather good, wasn't it?" That was a success. And it sounds like, on the one hand, you were in your 40s when this hit, and so you were bulletproof given what you'd gone through before. But on the other hand, does that allow you to stop and actually enjoy it that much when it works?
Well, it's certainly the movies, the success of those 2 films in that year opened a lot of doors for us. We went from being, struggling filmmakers who were desperately trying to get movies made to suddenly people actually thought we might know what we were talking about and were interested in hearing what our new ideas were. And the experience itself was in many ways a nightmare. It was extraordinarily physically exhausting from the moment on February 14th when we sold the script to when it came out, early in the following summer. We didn't stop. We didn't draw a breath. And I certainly didn't have a decent night's sleep. My back went out, and we were working, as I said, 100 days and 6-day weeks, and the movie went into the new year when it was supposed to have been wrapped up in 1990, and then we lost our director during post-production and had to jump in with Stuart Baird and recut the film. And Penn was busy doing the sound mix while Stuart and I were still editing the picture. So by the time the movie actually came out, it was like, okay, can I get a night's sleep tonight? It was a nightmare that turned out to be, a huge, gigantic breakthrough for us, and we've enjoyed the success of it ever since.
Before I'm coming to the end of my time. I've hugely appreciated your time. I just wonder if I can, because I went through your collective filmography, and there's one film I watched years ago which I loved, and I've struggled to track down a copy again since. I have never spoken to anyone involved with it. And so while I've got you both, can you tell me about Dangerous Lives of the Altar Boys?
Wow,
and how that came together? Because that strikes me as one of the lost films of that decade, and it's really hard even to track down now. Love that film.
It was a pet project of one of our employees. He absolutely loved the book,
Yeah.
And he brought us the book, and we optioned it, and then it turned out that Jodie Foster was also a gigantic fan of the script of the book. And so it was just a total joy to work with Jodie. She's such a professional. She's such a perfectionist too. She's a real hard taskmaster.
She's a very scary nun as well, just to add to that list. Yeah, terrifying nun.
Yeah, and it's fun to see the success of one of the young actors who's gone on to do very well. Thank you. In Succession. So it filmed in one of the Carolinas, I think North or South Carolina, I can't remember. I don't know, it was probably slightly lower profile movie at the time, but it found its audience, which wasn't a wide one, but there are people like you who really love that film.
Yeah, it never got a UK release to my knowledge. I had to import the DVD from deep discountdvd.com or something in a sale or something like that. But I was determined to name check it.
I think it's indicative of what we live in as business, is that you invest your life in something you cannot control.
Yeah,
and I wrote a book on screenplay writing. One of the chapters is, was it worth it? And I tried to find the worst review I could of my movie Moll Flanders, which I did with Robin Wright and Morgan Freeman, because there was one review that said I should have been horsewhipped for making the film. And my chapter is just to say, I found the worst review I could of my film, put it in the book, and said, having read that woman is entitled to opinions, but knowing that I was going to get that kind of response from somebody, would I do the movie again? Yes, because the actual experience and what I was trying to do and who I was as a human being was brought out by the opportunity to make that film. And I made that film with John, and I still consider it to be a blessing to have had the opportunity to make it.
Yeah, I think it's a brilliant movie. I can go one better, actually. I've just recently discovered a review in the LA Times of a film we released called Blown Away.
I remember that, Stephen Hopkins.
And Jeff Bridges, where the reviewer said his idea of a nightmare would have to watch a double bill of Backdraft and Blown Away. He managed to go back 5 years in time to demolish one of our previous movies while reviewing the latest one.
And genuinely, that's a brand new review that they've just gone back and just like sought that particular film.
The review was from the original.
Right. Okay. I was going to say that would be dedication.
I just found it. I was telling someone this story, and so I went up and Googled this LA Times review of Blown Away, and there it is.
Oh, well, congratulations. Well, that Stephen Hopkins went on to 24, didn't he? That kind of was the next turning point in his career. I remember that. You're finding talent there. So, I mean, hopefully I can get you back onto this podcast in the future. Can I just ask, what are the two of you up to now, and how can we find out a bit more about you?
Well, Penn is still turning out screenplays every day, and has got some fabulous projects in the works. And I consult when I can, but I'm also working full time as at USC Cinema School, talking to the next breed of filmmakers coming through. One of whom I proudly celebrate is Ryan Coogler. He's a friend of mine. Yeah.
Well, there's your Rocky link for you straight away, isn't it?
There you go.
Yes.
John is literally beloved by the students. He is a wonderful mentor and an ally. He's an encourager. And because he comes from the business instead of being an educator, he's also able to be very practical and give them solid help to get to their futures. I'm working on things which I'm spending my time. So I'm only working on things that I think are worthy of my opportunities. One is a murder mystery set amongst the Navajo, because I think there's incredible values in tribal beliefs and their perspectives. One is a story about a kid who's stranded on a desert island at the age of 4 and grows up with dolphins. One is a comedy about 3 women that discover they were all married to the same guy at a will reading, and he seems to have shot himself. And what it turns out is that he was an undercover cop and had fallen in love with each of them romantically. And now they start to think he may have been murdered and collaborate on trying to catch his killer. So 3 very different pieces, but all of them, I love working with women. The dolphin one is an opportunity to make a film that has an ecological hero, kind of like the reverse of Jaws. Let's make a film that celebrates the oceans. And then the Navajo one is a story that is about a detective with a tragedy in his past, learning to come to grips with himself.
Well, I wish you the best with all of your endeavours, and hopefully we can get you to the UK for a screening of Robin Hood at some point in the future.
That'd be lovely.
John Watson and Penn Densham, thank you so much for your time, and we look forward to seeing you in the UK soon.
Thank you. Our pleasure.
Real pleasure.
And that brings to an end my conversation with Penn Densham and John Watson. I'm hugely appreciative of their time. Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves is available now from Arrow in a new 4K Ultra HD set. You can also get it on Blu-ray as well. And I think that's pretty much it. That brings to the end this special episode of Film Stories. As always, thank you for your time and thank you for listening. If I've not bored you completely, you can find more from me on Twitter at Simon Brew. More from the entire Film Stories project at Film Stories. You can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/filmstoriesonline, youtube.com/filmstories. Our website is filmstories.co.uk, and if you go to store.filmstories.co.uk, you can buy all of our print magazines and our Blu-ray, with more Blu-rays hopefully coming on the way soon. More on those in due course. I'm going to go away now and prepare your regular episode of Film Stories. Until then, you all take care, you all look after yourselves. I'll be back soon with more Film Stories. Bye bye.